Joining us right now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Aronberg, as I welcome you both. Okay, Lisa, what is the legal justification for there being hours-long hearings on an issue that has already been rejected in similar challenges?
If you genuinely believe no one is above or below the law, there isn't much of a justification. This is the kind of motion that could be decided on the papers, even if, as Judge Cannon seems to believe, this is a novel legal argument that deserves her full attention. What I can't put my head around is devoting more than a day to this. And by the way, those hearings that Ken was referring to occurring next week, one of those days of hearings is about a secondary argument that also deals with the propriety of Jack Smith's appointment. So it's really like a day and a half of hearings just on the issue of whether he was constitutionally appointed. I'm wrestling with why have those 2 days of hearings when, as the Trump people themselves say in a June 11th filing, this is just a legal argument. They're also using this particular issue that Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed as sort of a wedge to force in a campaign theme into their legal filings, saying President Trump has, in fact, been injured by the fact, and this is their language, not mine, that the Attorney General unleashed Smith as a Biden campaign surrogate to try to harm President Trump's campaign by any means necessary. There's absolutely no evidence of that, Alex, whatsoever, nor do they cite any in the filings in this case. But they seem to be using this Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed argument as a vehicle for saying what Jack Smith really is a Trojan horse for the Biden campaign.
Well, it also sounds like they're just using it to buy time, because if they throw it out there, they know it's going to have to be addressed. Let me ask you something about Ken's reporting as well, that Judge Aileen Cannon is taking on so much on her own shoulders. Surely there have to be associates who, under normal circumstances, would help out with this.
Well, sure. And the judge also has law clerks as well. I will say that she is being buried under paper to some extent by Trump and his lawyers. They filed 7 different motions to dismiss, but she's not doing herself a wealth of help either. She, for example, said instead of filing what lawyers would call an omnibus motion to dismiss, file your papers separately. That added to the amount of stuff she has before her. And she's not using the magistrate judges. Now, in different districts of the country, some districts don't have a practice of sort of pushing off motion practice to the magistrate judges who are not lifetime tenured judges. They are only there for a discrete period of time. That may be her concern. If I've got a defendant who's the former president of the United States, am I really going to push off motions of a constitutional nature on a judge who themselves doesn't have lifetime tenure? Maybe not. Here in New York, for example, the federal judges don't tend to push off that much work on their magistrates. But if I had the workload that Judge Cannon did right now, and I knew that time was of the essence, I would be thinking, how do I use my law clerks creatively? How do I ask the chief judge for some more help? Maybe an extra law clerk, given the gravity of the situation and the fact that it involves classified filings. And yes, I would use that magistrate judge, if not for everything, for some things to move this case along.
Interesting. So, Dave, I'm curious what you make of people like, let's say, John Sale, who says Cannon's behavior just shows she's giving things very careful thought. And if you take politics out of this, there should be no rush to judgment. But here's the question. Can you really take the politics out of this when it is so deeply intertwined in this case?
It sure looks bad, Alex. You have someone who is serving as a referee who makes the call for the same team over and over again. So I think we're right to start questioning the motivations of that referee. And I love John Sale. I do think it's a benign explanation to say she's just inexperienced. I think it's legitimate to ask questions about why is she treating Donald Trump differently than all the other defendants before her. She has a reputation of being very tough on crime. She's a former federal prosecutor herself. But when it comes to Donald Trump, she's like a civil libertarian. She's like Better Call Saul. So it's different than her reputation. And I agree with Lisa. I don't see a real reason why she can't let Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart, a friend of mine, a great guy, very experienced, deal with these issues. Instead, she's doing it all herself. It's slow walking the case. It is so frustrating. This is dilatory purgatory for Jack Smith. I feel for him. And it's a shame because this is the strongest case against Donald Trump, but also it's the one least likely to be heard anytime soon.
So then give me your sense of whether this is bias on her part, inexperience potentially, or are people just being too hard on her because she's actually just trying to proceed over this the best way she can?
as a sitting prosecutor, I'm not going to accuse a federal judge of being corrupt. I do understand, though, why people are asking questions based on her rulings, which have been overwhelmingly favorable to Donald Trump, enough so that the conservative 11th Circuit Court of Appeals repudiated her, embarrassed her publicly last year when she got involved in the whole special master issue. And of the 3 judges who made that decision in the 11th Circuit, 2 of them were also appointed by Donald Trump. So I would say it's a mixture of inexperience, the fact that she's also by herself in the Fort Pierce courthouse. There's no adult supervision there. She's got her law clerks, and they come and go. And I do think she's just being very careful to the person who appoints her. I'm not going to go any further than that, but it does tell you that when it comes to a legitimate motion, like Jack Smith's motion to gag the former president on attacking law enforcement, she gave that motion just a few hours of a hearing. Meanwhile, this crazy motion about getting rid of the special counsel, calling it unconstitutional, she's given a day and a half to. How do you explain that?
The Alvin Bragg situation, the gag order, weigh in on that one because you've got some pretty strong thoughts on it.
I do. And, you know, Alvin Bragg has been subject to a litany of threats, as have the people in his office who are not themselves either elected officials or even political appointees. What we saw from his office today and asking Judge Juan Merchan to keep the gag order primarily in place is an effort to say, hey, we know that this is extraordinary and the threats we're facing are extraordinary and recent and serious. So we have new reporting based on the filing today that Alvin Bragg's office, through an NYPD official, says, hey, look, you guys said that the threats that we told you about before are too old. Look at what's happened during the last 3 months. Look at what's happened in 2024.
Scary.
61 out of 289 threats logged by the NYPD against public officials have been against Bragg and his team. 4 of them have justified referrals to other prosecutors' offices, and they include 2 bomb threats to 2 people associated with the case just on the first day of trial alone, Alex. If that doesn't justify keeping the gag order in place, even though the trial is over, with respect to counsel in Alvin Bragg's office, I don't know what else will. And I should also note, Alvin Bragg himself is not part of the gag order.
It is a narrow gag. It is absolutely right.
It is a narrow gag because he is a politician. He's a person who ran for office, and he subjected himself to this. That doesn't mean that the threats against him are valid or excusable, but the former president is free to talk about Alvin Bragg, and when he complains that somehow he's been gagged politically, that's not entirely true.
Okay, Lisa, Dave, always good to break things down with both of you. Thank you so much.